Okay, we are continuing with our test review for functions, and we are on number 12. It says, which situation matches this graph? Now, there's nothing labeled on my axes, but if I read through here, it shouldn't be too difficult to figure out what this could be a graph of. So let's just look through every single answer choice, every single scenario, to see what would match up. The profit made, on letter A, the profit made as the number of items sold increases. So if the number of items you sell increases, don't you think that the profit should also increase? And I would think that's a positive correlation, and that doesn't look like my graph. So I'm going to say it's not A. Letter B says the amount of gasoline in a gas tank as a car is driven. So as I drive the car, the amount of gas in the tank should go down. It looks a lot like my graph up there, and so I'm going to keep that one open. I think that's a good possibility, but I'm going to check all my answer choices just to be sure. Letter C says the depth of the water in a bathtub as it's being filled. So as it's being filled, the depth of the water should increase, so that should be a positive correlation. That's not going to be the answer. And letter D, the altitude of a helium balloon after it's released by a small child. So the altitude is going to keep increasing, so that's a positive correlation as well. So I know for sure that B is my answer. It's the only one that makes sense, that as a car drives, the gas in the tank decreases. So this is driving the car, and this is the amount of gas in the tank. The amount of gas is going to go down as I drive. All right, next question. All right, this is number 13 is another question where I'm going to look at every answer choice and see which one matches this graph. Usually your x-axis is your independent and your y-axis is your dependent. So let's look at each of these scenarios and see which one matches this graph. So letter A, Jorge earns $20 for each hour worked. All right, if I'm looking at this, I would think that hours should be on the bottom and earnings would be on the y-axis, which would be opposite of what this is. But even if it were switched, this says an hour is 10. So that's not it. Just doesn't match. All right, letter B. For every 10 pieces of candy Stacy buys, she pays $1. Now this is a possibility because this says, well, it depends on how much candy she buys. So for 10 pieces, we have $1. For another 10 pieces, it's another $1. So for 20 pieces, it's 2. For 30, this kind of makes sense, but I'm going to look at all my answer choices. Letter C says for every 10 students at a dance, 2 teachers are needed. But the graph here says for every 10, there's only 1 needed. So that's not going to be it either. Sorry. And then letter D, a runner runs at a constant rate of 2 miles every 30 minutes. So if I went to 30 minutes, that says 3, not 2. That doesn't match. Oh, what a mess. So yeah, my answer is going to be B. It's the only one that makes any sense at all. So choose B for your answer there. For every 10 pieces, she pays $1. It's the only one that makes sense. All right, next question. Okay, number 14 is asking for the range of the function below. All right, this is a function. If it would pass the vertical line test, and also these arrows right here do imply that it goes on forever, but I'm looking for the range. The domain would be all real numbers because it's going on forever, that direction and that direction. So the domain is all real numbers, but we're looking for the range. So my range is everywhere from the 2 upward. Everywhere from the 2 upward is going to be my y values for this graph. So I can simply just say that my y is always going to be in the range of greater than or equal to 2. This is all I have to write. Y is greater than or equal to 2 because it will bottom out at 2 and it will be everything greater than that. So that's all I have to put for the range. For these kinds of questions, please just make sure that you know what you're looking for, domain or range. All right, next question. Okay, number 15, we're looking at one of those time graphs. So let's see if we can interpret. Let's write our own graph just looking at the scenario number 15. So the water level in a creek was at a maximum height. So if I were to just draw that, I'd say it starts out up high. It's at its maximum height after a heavy rain. So the water level in the creek decreased at a constant rate. That means it's going to slowly come down at a constant rate. It's not going to be all wonky. It's not going to be zigzag. It's going to be a constant rate, a nice line coming down. And it said it decreased at a constant rate for several hours until it leveled off to its regular height. And so we're going to have a level off there. And so which of the following graphs? So already I can see that A matches my scenario that I drew myself. But I'm going to check the other graphs just to make sure. Just looking at letter C while we're on this page, letter C is saying that it's increasing the water level. Remember, our y-axis is water level, is increasing, and then it gets to a steady height. Let's look at our other graphs. Letter B says it is at a high rate and just stays there. There's no decrease or increase. And then letter D says it was steady at a very high level and then decreased at a constant rate. So it doesn't exactly match. So our answer is going to be A, because that matches the scenario to the T. Just make sure you read it over and over again, look at all your graph choices, and see which one is the best representation of your scenario. All right, let's look at number 16. A dentist made the scatter plot below to show the number of cavities her patients had as it relates to the number of times they flossed their teeth each week. Hopefully your teeth are really, really healthy and you're flossing. Yeah, right. Anyway, so this scatter plot shows the number of cavities the patient had as it relates to the number of times they floss. So this dentist wanted to see a comparison. Number of cavities versus the number of times the patient flossed. So take a look at that. And the question is, which of the following best describes the correlation for the data? Now, obviously, this is a negative correlation. I'd say it's kind of a weak negative, but it is definitely going down the hill as your independent increases, the number of cavities decreases. So we always start with your independent increasing and what is happening to our dependent. In this case, cavities are decreasing as the number of times you floss increases. So I guess she got her point across, but that's definitely a negative correlation. Positive correlation goes up, negative correlation goes down, and then no correlation is just all over the place and we don't see a trend at all. All right, next question. All right, number 17 is just a bunch of plugging in. The value of y varies directly with x. That means y depends on x. Which function represents the relationship between x and y if y is equal to 20/3 and x is 30? So we're just going to plug in for each of these answer choices to see what will work when y is 20/3 and x is 30. So if I plug in 30 for x on this one, what does y have to be? Well, it would seem that y would have to be 6,000. So that's not the answer. All right, plug in 30 for x here. 2/9 times 30. Well, let's do some cross-canceling here. That's 20/3, and that's what I'm supposed to get. So that's a possibility, but let's just check just to be sure. 110/3 times 30. Okay, that's going to be 1,100. That's not it. And then 9/2 times 30. Well, I know it's not going to be 20/3, so that's not it either. It's got to be G. All right, so that's our answer for number 17. Let's move on.